Welcome, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Logical Conclusion. I'm your host, Antoine. I have David on the line with me. Go ahead, David.
What's going on, everybody? Glad to be here. I'm definitely in tiptoe anticipation about this particular discussion. I think a lot of positive is going to come out of this talk, and hopefully some people can glean something out of the things we go through. And yeah, looking forward to it.
That's right. So if you're looking at the title of the video and you're wondering, what are we talking about? Well, obviously, we're talking about population today. In particular, we're talking about the year 2100 population of Africa, which is going to be 4.3 billion. Now, to a lot of you, 2100 is maybe too far off. But if you look at it like this, a baby born today will be 80 years old in the year 2100, right? Or 82 years old. We may or may not live to see it, but that doesn't mean you're not going to feel the pinch or feel the pressure, because it's not like we're just all overnight going to have 4.3 billion people on the continent. Right now, we're talking about a population of roughly 1.2 billion. 2015, the population was maybe 1.183 billion. And in 2025, we're looking at a population around 1.4 billion. At some point, it hits a critical mass, and it's really just growing up very, very exponentially, right? So we're going to get to a really big number of 4.3 billion by the year 2100. So let me start off by sharing my screen out so everybody can see this. All right, we'll show you so this is population pyramid. This is if you do any type of population searches and you're looking for a future population, this is going to be the #1 result that you get on Google, right? It'll be at the very top, the populationpyramid.net. So right now we're looking at the year 2025. Now I chose the year 2025 specifically because that's the year I'm looking to actually make that move to Africa. And we're looking at the population of Nigeria. Nigeria's population will be 233 million in the year 2025. We go to the year 2020, you can see that the population is 206 million. So you can see how quickly things ramp up as the number gets bigger and bigger, right? You have more people, you have a very young population, as you can see here, right? And these young people, when they move into childbearing age, they have more children, right? And eventually you have 752 million people in Nigeria in the year 2100. But this is the interesting part. In Nigeria, a country roughly the size of Texas and Oklahoma put together, in the year 2035, you'll have 293 million. And in the year 2040, it actually overtakes the U.S. in population. Looking in the year, in between the year 2040 and 2045, it's going to overtake the U.S. population. Let's look at the U.S., see where they're at. What is the U.S. population in that same year? About 381 million. So maybe I'm lying to you. But 2045, let's go 2050. 2050 is 388 million. All right, let's look at Nigeria. I'm not gonna lie to you. Believe me, you're lying eyes. In the year 2050, 398 million in Nigeria. In the year 2050, I will be what? I'll be 71 years old in the year 2050. In the year 2050, there will be more Africans or Nigerians in one country than in the entire United States of America. Dave, first initial thoughts, just looking at that number by itself, right? What do you think?
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I think there's a lot of pros, and there's also some potential cons of that. You said that Nigeria is approximately the size of Texas and Oklahoma together.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a small piece of land to carry or hold that number of people. I can see there potentially being an issue with resources. So I think by 2050, there needs to be increased production and manufacturing of goods within Nigeria. And taking that into consideration, it's going to be important that they also do what they can to help prevent pollution and things of that nature if they do increase their production of goods. But when I look at that number, I think opportunity, opportunity for the people of Nigeria and for individuals who are part of the African diaspora across the world to excel from an economic standpoint, to use their ingenuity, pull their resources together, and become producers in this world. I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
And you'll still be a relatively young man in the year 2050. You'll be in your 60s, right?
Yeah, I'll be in my mid to late 60s. Yep.
This is on our doorstep right now.
Yeah.
We're talking about the next 20 or 30 years. This is going to be the new demographic of the world if somebody does, and somebody. People will try to stomp on this, right? Or they'll try to change this. These are not Antoine Lewis's numbers. These are not David's numbers, right? This is the number that you're going to get on most population websites when you're looking at the population growth over the next years. And you're looking at Africa having the youngest population, I think like 30. It's a sane amount of people below the age of 15.
Something else that comes to my mind is leadership. Like hopefully there's a stable socio-political system that's in place that allows for freedom when it comes to their individual market, but that also helps to kind of maintain some sense of order or guidance for the country.
Yeah.
So
you said it, like leadership is absolutely, it's critical, right? Because you have this large group of young people that are going to need employment. And if the employment is not there when they come of age, and their bellies start to grumble, that is going to be one hard revolution to put down. And it could be a revolution about nothing. And that's the issue you have. And you have, most of your crimes, most of your, just tension is dealt by young men with nothing to do.
Yeah.
You put them to work. Oh, that is a beautiful amount of power and industry and human capital. If there's no work for them to do, or if there's no guidance and leadership there for them, not only do you miss that opportunity, but that potentially becomes a danger or a drag on the economy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Nigeria's school system, but ensuring that they have a school system that's predicated on preparing their youth and their children for the jobs of the future, or gearing them towards a particular a field that will allow for them to ascertain a skill within that field and be a producer and make good money. So yeah, school structure is going to be important. Honestly, I think like their laws as far as civility is going to be important as well, and things of that nature. But I don't know, are you familiar with Nigeria's school system as is? Is it?
As I understand, it's very Western and British, and a lot of people don't like the fact that it's so British. But yeah, so they don't. It's a lot that they don't learn. It's like we get to the point where there's so much opportunity in education and educating your own youth, and giving them the right information. I'm not even saying you have to give them some type of black power. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying, what if you just taught them things that really matter? What if you taught them how to balance a checkbook? What if you taught them how to fix their car?
Yeah.
What if you taught them how to treat people? What if you taught them how to do like customer service jobs? I mean, there's all these different things that, aren't taught in American schools, aren't taught in Western schools. Not to mention language, like your own language, or like a common language that all Africans speak or can speak. I mean, that's to the betterment of the group, betterment of the people. But instead, not only are we getting history that doesn't pertain to us, and that's another issue, Dave. It's like, it's not just what I teach you, it's like the glasses that you're looking through when I teach it to you. So if I'm teaching you about science, right? but I'm making it look like all the scientists don't look like you or weren't you, then you're not really going to have as much interest, because subconsciously you're thinking this isn't about me, this is other people. But if you're teaching that exact same information, but now the people that you're describing, or the people who are discovering things, actually look like them, well, then they can relate. It's like those small pieces of education that we're missing out on. And I think Nigeria has a good school system, or a decent school system right now. You look at the literacy rate for over 15 in most African countries, the literacy rate is not too sexy, right? Might be. It just varies, depends on what country you're talking about. Some of them, it was low as 30%. Others, it was as high as 70 or even 80%. But then when you zoom in and you're just looking at 15 to 24, now you'll see it's much more on parity with Western nations, which is telling you that this new coming young African is getting ready to move into the employable, the ranks of the employable, actually can read. And if they can read, that's telling you a lot more about that person as a whole. It means that they're able to use the internet. That means they're able to upload to the internet and share ideas. And they're able to do more than one job. If you don't read and you're a plumber, I guarantee you're going to have a hard job doing anything other than what you know to do. And if somebody takes that industry away or suppresses that industry, you don't have any other options. But if you can read, you can learn. So it's so much that this is so much potential in this next crop of young Africans that is coming up. We just have to really make sure that we're capturing. And I say we because I look at myself, we look at ourselves as part of the diaspora. Believe me, African Americans are concerned with Africa wholly, or else I wouldn't be making all the videos that I make. Search for Uhuru wouldn't be making all the videos he makes. You got a lot of people here that are passionate because they see their future, and they see a future, and they see potential in the continent.
Yeah, and I tend to reflect on my experience here in America as a Black individual. So I'm kind of coming from that place, but I am starting to learn more and more about different countries in Africa, different people within Africa. But a quick question for you. Do you know what the breakdown is of, in regards to the number of Africans going into certain fields of expertise? Like, do Africans have a decent percentage, or let's talk about Nigeria specifically? Are there a decent percentage of Nigerians that's going into research, or that's going into science, or going into computer engineering and things of that nature? Because again, when I look at that number and when I think about what the jobs of the future will look like, and what areas will allow for the most growth and economic benefit or output, I think to myself, man, it's so monumental that not only Nigerians or Africans, but even us, a part of the African diaspora, that we go into those fields. And like, how do we go about promoting for us to enter into those particular areas? And I know everybody doesn't have to go into those areas. Yeah. And like, we're going to need workers. Everybody can't be a CEO or owner of a particular business that's putting out products within those fields and things of that nature. But I think we need a heavier or stronger footprint in those particular areas moving forward. Especially Nigeria. When I look at that number, they're going to overcome America. Man, that's
yeah. And the short answer is no, I don't know, and that's actually another video that I want to do that talks more about some of the other analytics of the population and of the wealth of these nations. So I don't have numbers on those exact occupations. However, I was watching a video, and it was about remittances. Money that's sent back by foreign nationals to their home countries. And it was interesting because it talked about how remittances help and it hurts also. And one of the reasons it gave for it hurting, and we will delve into this more in another video, but one of the reasons that it gave for remittances hurting nations was because it actually it's a coefficient of brain drain. You know, so let's say you have a bunch of Nigerian doctors in the United States. Imagine if all these Nigerian doctors were in Nigeria, building and helping with that large population they're getting ready to help have. But a lot of people see more value in being here. You know, I watched this video from Search last night. Shout out to Search for Hulu. But he was talking about, you know, missed opportunity and how Africans get here and they get comfortable. And I think people in the comment section and the chat section, they were getting upset about it. But he really was not lying. Like, people come here and they say that they're going to go back. But once that salary sets in and they get that big house and, you know, everything is just so rosy in the US, people find it really hard to go back. Some do, but just like some African Americans go back, and some don't. A lot don't. A lot stay here. But they send money back, which helps to a certain extent, because that's not building the country if that money's not being used in the right areas. It's putting more money into circulation in Nigeria, right? All right, so let's widen the conversation up, because we just discussed Nigeria, but let's look. I'm gonna share my screen out again, Dave. Let's look at the entire population of Africa, and then let's look at sub-Saharan Africa. So that's Nigeria in 2050. Let's look at sub-Saharan Africa first, as a matter of fact. Let's go there, and then we'll go to the entire Africa. So sub-Saharan Africa, we're talking about, you know, that's a code word. It's not, sub-Sahara is not a continent, right? But that's the code word for that's where the black people is at. We didn't come up with that. We didn't come up with that.
Yeah.
So this is just sub-Saharan Africa in the year 2050. In the year 2050, sub-Saharan Africa will be 2.123 billion people.
Jeez.
Okay, that's just around the corner. But let's see where we're at right now. Let's take it back to 2020.
And this graph takes into consideration birth rates, death rates, all of that, right?
It takes all that into consideration. It even has a pyramid here on the left to tell you what age, what percentages we have in each age, how many males, how many female. Gotcha. So it's telling you that people who will live to see the age of, let's just say 70 and above, get 3 score and 10, about 13.6 million women and 15.8 million women and 13.6 million men in sub-Saharan Africa will live to be 70, 74. But if you look at what's below 25, look at this base right here. Look at all these people, 5 to 9, 0 to 4, 10 to 14.
Man, we have to set them up for success.
Yeah. So I mean, it's 2.12 billion sub-Saharan Africans in the year 2050. By the time they get ready, I'll say I can see myself living to be 90 years old. Man. I pray God gives me 90 years. 2060, just sub-Saharan. We're not talking about black people across the world, because, you know, we can give our own numbers here in the Caribbean, South America, US. We're just talking about Africa. 2.5 billion sub-Saharan Africans in the year 2060, when I'm about 891 years old. And if the good Lord blesses me to see the year 2100, I'll be 121 years old, and maybe they'll come up with a pill that allows people to live that long.
And that's not too far-fetched.
Nope.
With medical advancements.
3.9 billion sub-Saharan Africans. Let's look at Africa as a whole, and then we'll look at the world, just so we can get that final number that's really just going to blow people's mind. Africa is 4.36. That's really 4.4 billion. I should have had 4.4 billion in the title.
Do Africans supplant Indians or those from India?
Yep.
Wow.
And then if we're looking at the world population, excuse me, this thing. What in the world? There we go. Oh, it is. I missed it. 11.2 2 billion people in the world, 4.4 billion people in Africa, is telling you that more than 1 in 3 people in the world will be living on the continent of Africa.
Wow.
African people, melanated people, Black people. Right? Now, again,
and that's not including the African diaspora.
that's not including the diaspora.
Wow.
But the diaspora does not do as well because, you know, right now in America, we are the race that pretty much aborts itself the fastest. Right? So America's population, United States, and remember, we'll probably stay. We've been 12 to 13% of the population for a long time. I think it's actually going down a bit, just because of we're not living our best lives over here. We could be doing a little bit better.
Yeah.
I believe we'll still be in America. We'll still be doing great things in America, but population of America at that time is 450 million.
Do they break it down into ethnicities?
They don't. But let's just say 13% of 450 million, whatever that is, that's what I think will be. So we're looking at probably close to 50 million, 50 or 60 million.
I think we'll probably represent more than 13% of the country's population by the year 2100. Because just based off how things are changing right now, as far as the demographic breakdown.
Yeah, but even if you go back to the year 1960, we were something like 14 to 15%. It's actually going down since then. So the growing population has been Hispanic, and they're also melanated people. They're also people, like all people. We love all people here in the logical conclusion, but we're just trying to keep it as real as possible, right? Let's see what the population of Europe is in the year. Europe's population, 645 million. And you see they're actually looking at Europe's population declining. Around the year 2025, it's going to decline and continue to decline. That has a lot to do with just birth rates, because people in developed nations have fewer children because they have more bills. They have they're more selfish. They're more about their lives, so they live their life and have fewer children and fewer people to replace them. So this is maybe a call to Europeans to have more babies.
Yeah. Right? Oh, I did want to make mention of this. I'm looking at the statistics right now. Actually, the percentage of Black people has increased in the United States, has increased since 1920 from 9.9% to 12.6%. So not a considerable increase, but
what was it in 1960?
1960, it was 10.5%. 1970, 11.1%, and then it just continues to decline.
I thought it was higher in 60.
And white people actually each decade, their representation within the U.S. population has actually decreased each decade, starting since 1910. No, I'm sorry, since 1950.
Wow.
From 89.5% now to 72.4%.
Hey, so this is the question I have for you, Dave. If you're talking about 4.4 billion Black people, and you start talking about that's just Africa, so let's call it a cool, because it's about 250 million Black people in the Western Hemisphere now, plus all the Africans that you have in the Middle East and everything else. Let's just call it a cool 5 billion Black people. All right, I don't think I'm overshooting by saying that at all. Let's call it a cool 5 billion Black people. At that point, when half of the world is Black, what is you can't use Black as some type of unifying factor. I don't think that's going to work. I think people are already, if you go to the continent, Africans separate themselves because there's nothing special about being Black. Here, there's something special about being Black because you're part of a minority. We have to stick together, everything else. But when you go to Africa and everybody's Black, and that's why I think everybody who is black should at some point go to Africa just to visit. When you go to Africa and everybody's black and nobody cares that you're black, at what point does that no longer become a thing? And how can you use black how can we talk about black unity at that point?
Man, that's a really good question. I think the perspective of Europeans will have a huge influence on their being black, or the importance of black, not just in the US, but across the world. So if this concept of white persists, there will always be this concept of black. And I know these are just social constructs, but they'll always be there. The whole reason for the creation of white and black was obviously to stratify, or to basically divide groups of people up into different brackets, to make one group superior to the other, so on and so forth. So if there's still a constant need for that across the world, and to be honest, white people make up the smallest percentage of folks across the world, so I think that that demand, or that need for white, may always exist in order for them to continue to maintain their dominance or their power. Because let's be honest, most things in this world is Eurocentric, and they essentially kind of control the major aspects or major fields within life. So guess what I'm trying to say is, there may always be that need for white and black, or for them to kind of collectivize and be one race in order for them to maintain that dominance. And because of that, I think that there may always be this white or black. I mean, I feel like the perfect scenario would be us getting rid of that, and we all just live together in peace, like across the world, or even within our individual countries. Everybody just lives as one people, and the people of the individual countries are for the furtherance and for the progression of their country. But that would be the perfect scenario. But I don't know if. And then when I think about the struggle of Black people across the world, I think at least at this point in time, it's important for us to unify in order for us to gain a little bit more power and control over, the major fields or major aspects of life in general. So I think that there won't be a need for us to categorize ourselves like all people of African ancestry or African descent as Black, once we have more of once we have a greater participation in like production and manufacturing of goods and science and medicine and in these different areas of life. I don't know. Am I making sense?
No, well spoken. Well spoken. So, but just more numbers. So we said about 4.4 billion Africans. Asia, which is a much bigger continent than Africa, well, not much, but it is the largest continent, has roughly, in 2100, has roughly 4.8, let's say, close to 5 billion people, right? And that Asia, of course, is going to include India, China, most of South Asia, East Asia. It's going to include the Middle East. But that's 5 billion people plus 4.5 billion people in Africa. And we told you that there's only 11.2, 11.3 billion people in the world, which means with math, that's less than 2 billion other people. And we're talking about South America, which you know what South America looks like.
Yep.
And we're talking about Europe.
Jeez.
So again, like not just 80 years from now. I mean, this dynamic really starts happening within our middle ages, 60 and 70 years old. We're going to see this change where the population is going to be in Africa is going to grow enormously. And white people are going to become a smaller and smaller segment. So they become a world minority. What's the word for? Right now the big catchphrase is white power or white privilege. What privilege what they have and only being, let's say, 1 in 11 people on Earth, can they still, will we still throw around the word white privilege when, 10 out of every 11 people are not white?
Yeah, I guess it all depends on how much power they have at that time. I mean, if they still control the bulk of the world's economy, and we know money and power are almost equivalent, then I think that they'll still, yeah, I see what you're saying. It's like, geez, at that point, come on now. If we represent that much of the world's population, you would think that there would be some progression within us, from us intrinsically, and that we would start to manufacture more, that we would start to have a bigger impact in, some of those areas I named previously. And then it's like, yeah, what's the excuse? Look at the numbers. Yeah.
And then the other thing is, as much as all these numbers say the same thing, you go to this website, you go to the next website, you pull up very similar or the same numbers. I don't know if these are black statisticians that are coming up with these numbers. Right? And part of me says, okay, maybe they can see 10 years out and they're giving us the correct numbers 10 years out, but can they really see 80 years out? Do they really know what's going to happen in 80 years? And is this like a quiet scare tactic in a way also to say, look at what's going to happen to the world in the next 80 years if we don't start producing more babies, or if we don't stop all these babies from being produced in Africa? Because sometimes people will throw this type of information out right in your face in order to, throw people off the trail, throw the dog off the trail, to put it plainly.
And to me, people who think like that, or specifically white people who think like that, have deep-rooted insecurities, right? To look at Africa and say, oh, they're growing in number, we need to get them under control. Why? Why do you feel the need to do you think that Africans are going to turn and try to destroy you? Like, this just seems to, people with that ideology, it seems like they may have some insecurities, as opposed to instead of being fearful of the increasing number of Africans, they should look at it as an opportunity to kind of build a relationship with Africa and be a part of Africa's growth, not only in numbers, but in other areas of life.
Yeah. I think a big part of it too, Dave, is just going to be like resources and people looking at, finite level of resources and wanting to maybe stop, that population from consuming all those resources, because they might want the resources for themselves. We know from, since the dawn of the homogenocene, resources have been pulled out of Africa, be it human resources, be it mineral wealth, be it oil. It's been pretty much a one-way unfair trade. As Donald Trump was saying, they're being very, very unfair. They've been taking advantage of Africa, and we're not going to let that happen anymore. So, end of the day, I think it's a resource game as much as it is a control game, if that's being played at all. I'm not saying this is what is happening. I'm just saying we need to look or be thinking about all of these things when it comes to the motherland, because you only get one motherland, right?
Do you think that the Africans or the African Union and people who are part of the African diaspora should really view that as a potential existential threat, that there are groups of people that look at the potential for population growth in Africa as a chance, or as a risk of Africans like taking advantage of all its precious resources and production of things? Like, do you think it's important that or do you think that right now that would probably be a little overblown to take that perspective?
No, I think you need to be thinking about 30 or 40 or even 80 years out, all the way to the year 2100. And you need to have a conceptual plan for everything that is a possibility. Even if it's not a high probability, there still needs to be a plan made for it, because indeed, the threat is there. That threat is definitely there. People are looking at this right now. All types of statisticians are looking at it and they're saying, okay, if we don't produce the jobs, if we don't produce the services for this new, these young Africans that are coming up right now, then you're going to be fueling Boko Haram, Al Shabaab, all sort of other terrorist organizations, because young people without something to do, without something to be, are going to fall wayward or fall into mischief, right? So yeah, I think we need to be looking at everything. Another question that has to do with standard of beauty, because right now the big catchphrase is everybody talks about, oh, there's a white standard of beauty. Even if you go to Africa, you go to buy clothes at one of these glitzy new malls that are just built.
Yeah.
The models that are selling the clothes, selling the soap, selling the cars, selling the bubble gum, they have a lot of white models to sell these things, knowing that there's no shortage of beauty in the African race. And that's okay. Anybody listening to this and you happen to be white, just so you know, I think all women are gorgeous. All right? I think white women are gorgeous. I think if I was in Italy and I saw a model, I would expect that model to be Italian. And when I'm in Africa, in Nigeria, I would expect that model to be Nigerian. I'm in Ghana, I would expect for that model to be Ghanaian, and I would expect for it to be a very beautiful person. I'm not saying that every picture you see, every advertisement that you see needs to have that. Just like if you I was in Korea, you would see black models in Korea and white models in Korea, more white than black, of course. But you also saw a healthy stock of Korean models, because it's selling to Korean people and they're putting ideas inside of Korean people's heads. Now let's take it to Africa. When it comes to the standard of beauty, and you're talking about more black people, I see a potential of, with there being fewer white people, like the fewer you have of something, the higher value you put on it. So what is going to happen to the standard of beauty, of Eurocentric beauty, or this, is that going to go up higher? Or is Africa, because of the sheer numbers and because of who they're selling to, there'll be more African models? Or, do we start promoting and giving the platform to black women? Do black men have the platform to give a black woman at that point, right? Because you also have to look at who owns the platform. Like, we don't own a lot of platforms, right? But if we have we should have the platform in Africa, of course. If we have that platform in Africa, do we promote people that look like ourselves? Or do we, in the back of our heads, still have this very high premium on European standards of beauty?
That's a really good question. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said who has the platform. So I think whoever controls the media, who controls TVs, radio, who controls those things, they have a huge influence on what's considered beautiful. So in Africa, yeah, I would expect, because I would think that African people would own social media. I would think that they would establish or define what the standard of beauty is. And I think as the world's population changes, there is a greater opportunity for that standard to be reestablished. But I do think that the people who are in control of the media really create or establish that standard. But the perfect scenario to me would be a standard that shows beautiful women from all different ethnic groups and all different walks of life. This concept of beauty and diversity. You know, I think that would be the perfect situation. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it all depends on who's in control.
Okay.
In my honest opinion. Yeah.
So, okay, another question. So, a lot of times when we're talking about diversity, you brought it up. Talk about diversity, and we talk about diversity in the boardroom. We talk about diversity at church. We talk about diversity in the bedroom. So, let's talk about that. At that point, when only 1 in 11 people on the planet are white, and if white people want to say, you know what, we're not mixing with anybody else, and we're gonna rebuild our numbers. Does that make them racist at that point?
I don't think so. I think if white people said we don't want to intermix or interbreed with any other ethnic group because we believe they're less than, or we believe that we're superior to them, then that would probably be more racist. But I think if they want to try to increase their population, I guess the question you would have to pose is, why do you feel the need to increase your population? Do you think that you cannot coexist with other groups of people, even if they represent the majority? Is there some a sense of insecurity that if you continue to decrease in size, or if you don't, that you would, in a sense, lose your influence or lose your power or lose your control, or that those group of people that make up the majority will try to suppress you or oppress you? You know, it's like, why do you feel the need for that? Now, if it's just from self-love, not saying that you dislike or hate any other group or you think any other group is less than, but you just love yourself and you love your people and you love your culture and way of life, I don't see that as being racist. I see that as just having a genuine love for self and for your people. Now, in the perfect world, perfect scenario, I think that we would just love all people, no matter what their cultural background is, and not think on that wavelength. But I don't know.
I thought about this too. And I just thought about this. But you also have test tube babies and stuff like that. Like, what's to stop somebody from, like, if they come up with some type of womb, like, a womb that's in a glass jar or something like that, like, no, hell with this. We're gonna make like 100 babies in each one of these, each level of this warehouse, right? It's gonna be 100 babies just being born, all of them little blue hair, blonde hair babies. You know what I mean? Like, we're not falling behind in population. I mean, like, we're talking, not only we talking about population, but we're talking about the future where technology is advancing very rapidly, right? And some people have a better grip on technology than others. I don't want to focus too much on what white people are doing because the show is about Africans. But it's just, I'm looking at all people. Also, what will the earth look like in the year 2100? Like, are we going to be more mixed up anyway? Like, at that point, are more people going to look more like my phenotype, not my genotype, because you don't know what my genotype is. Will they look more like a phenotype that is more mixed looking, more Spanish looking? Is this what the majority of people are going to look like at that point, where, people won't think as much about skin tone or Africans versus Europeans?
Yeah, that's a good point. I read this article not too long ago. Well, maybe it was like over a year ago, but they were talking about just that. With the advent of us being able to travel long distances in a short period of time through the air, through planes, and with the internet, and us being able to connect, people being able to connect with other people across the world, that ultimately you may end up with the human race just being more homogenous. And you may have. They brought up the idea of there being a lot of human beings that kind of fit that mixed phenotype that you're kind of hinting towards. So yeah, that's an interesting theory. When you think about it, I can see that with globalization and everything. Get to become more familiar with different people from different cultures and backgrounds, and I think that there is a higher chance of interbreeding and interracial relationships. I would have to look at the statistics. I don't know if they've increased. I assume that they have, but I've not looked at the actual statistics outside of the United States. But I wouldn't be surprised if the statistics have started to kind of slowly move towards that.
All right, so Cuz Dave has his own channel. His channel is called Tell It Like It Is. I like that title. Because he's on this channel today, because he's on the logical conclusion today, I'm going to tell it like it is. And, you know, I was in Africa in 2011, which was quite a bit of time ago. But, you know, going to Africa, I remember feeling like, you know, the average African American, feeling like we were under threat, like we were an endangered species or something like that. And like, man, you know, we got to do whatever we can because they're trying to kill all of us. You know, was more of I wasn't really at that level at that point. At one point I was kind of coming out of it at that time. But I went to Africa and I realized something when I got there. I said, the world will never run out of Black people. There were so many people, man. So many. It was seas and seas of people in Ghana. And Ghana's not even the biggest country in the world. We're probably talking like maybe the 12th or 13th ranked African country by population. It might be lower than that. But the point was, like, I saw these people, and for the most part, you know, I believe the U.S., but you do have a mixture of people in Ghana. The majority of Ghanaians they have a certain look to them, you know, and that's nothing. Look, if you're Ghanaian and you're watching this channel right now, you're beautiful. I love those Ghanaian women so much. They were gorgeous. I came back. I met this Ghanaian girl when I got back to the U.S. I dated her for about a year. She was gorgeous. She was a captain in the military. I could have made that work. Point I'm making is, though, they weren't as mixed, right? Definitely, they were not as mixed. Not saying that all Africans look the same. I know that if you go to northern Nigeria, other places, you have different tribes, and different tribes have different looks. I got that. But the point I'm getting at is, I just can't see Africa getting that mixed up in the next 80 years. It would take a whole hell of a lot of mixing, man.
Hey, well, you know, the Chinese population in Africa is slowly increasing.
Oh, tell it like it is.
You might see an increase in what's the appropriate term? Because Black and Japanese would be black knees. I guess black knees.
There you go. Those some beautiful people too. You know, what's up, Naomi Campbell? Black knees. Tyson, what's his name? The model dude.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
He's like a quarter Japanese.
Yeah.
Or a quarter Asian. So is Neo.
Yeah. You know another thing, cuz the gene that confers the concentration of melanin within your skin is the dominant gene, right? So when you have interracial relationships, and it's not always true, but for the most part, the product or the progeny of that consummation or the gathering of those two people, the Black person and Japanese or black and white or whatever, there's a higher likelihood that their child will be light skinned or darker in complexion as opposed to, you know, fair skinned.
I don't know when it comes to Asians, man. Like most of the time you used to get a black and a white mix. The person does look like a light-skinned black person, right?
Right.
Well, and the reason I said it is I'm 80% African, right? But some people will be 80% African and they'll be dark-skinned. My genetics are 80% African. I'm light-skinned, right? So I think it has a lot to do with, I don't know if color and genetics have that much in common. And the reason I say that is because you also have Africans in Africa who have been in Africa for hundreds of years, thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, and they are light-skinned. They're naturally light-skinned. Ethiopians, and some people may say Ethiopians are mixed with people from Yemen and whatever else. But then other people say, hey, they've been mixed with Yemen for the last 12,000 years. So if they've been mixed that long, I think that means that they are their own people at that point. You know, and if you're talking about northern tribes, and you know, if you're African, you might be able to catch me up on some of this if I'm wrong. But like I believe, like Fulani There's a few other ones that are naturally light-skinned people in Sudan who are mixed, you know. But a lot of the northern African countries, even those that can be considered as North Africa, have a lot of mixture.
They're further away from the equator though, but like they're not pale though, or they're not quote unquote white. I guess I'm sorry, that was the distinction I was trying to make. Like when you have a black and a Chinese person coming together, it could be African or someone a part of the African diaspora, or a black and white person. They're going to have a heavier concentration of melanin, usually or majority of the time, than their white parent.
Yeah, do you see a lot of when I see Asian and black mix, most of the time that baby looks really Asian.
Like as far as their facial features?
Their facial features look really Asian. Their hair may just be slightly curlier, but outside of that, they look pretty much Asian, especially when it's a black woman and an Asian man. And I don't know how much of a difference it makes if it's a male, female, female, male, you know, which race is which. But, you know, we might be getting a little bit off topic. That runs deep. But the point I'm trying to make is just that genetics and phenotype are two different things. Normally, if you have a black-white mix, the person he'll be 50%, he or she'll be 50% African, 50% white, but they'll look more like a person like me, even though I'm 80% African. You know, so it doesn't make a difference the amount of genetics as much as it is how much those genetics play out in that person's features, right? And the mixing is definitely been happening around the world for years. However, I don't see there ever being a point or period of time where there aren't like millions and millions of white people and millions just black people and millions of people who are just Indian or just Asian. Like I think you'll have maybe a nice, easy, gradual stratification between the two. But you're definitely going to have those populations at the extreme left or right that will still be extremely white or extremely black.
And not to get too much into genetics or too much into the history of humans, but I think a lot of that has to also do with the interbreeding that occurred with the different Homo species. Like for instance, if you take your typical white person, if you take just a random white person or someone of non-African ancestry, Eurocentric, of European ancestry, they have a certain percentage, usually 1 to 5% of Homo neanderthalis DNA, and they'll also have upwards to 50% HLA haplotypes from Homo neanderthalis within them. And if you take individuals from who have an Asiatic ancestry, they'll have like a certain percentage of Homo descendovin, I think is what it's called, within their, like a certain percentage of that particular Homo species within their DNA, and also a certain number of HLA haplotypes, or a certain percentage of HLA haplotypes from the Homo descendovin or denisovin, I'm sorry, within their DNA. And I think that plays also a huge role on their phenotype as well, because your phenotype confers like the genetics that exist within your your DNA and what you can express. So I think that plays a little role into it too. But yeah, I think I'm going down a rabbit hole. I get the point that you're making, though.
No, that's solid. That's solid. One of my favorite group of people to look at. I mean, I love looking at Ethiopian women. Now, I'm taken, but still, I think just the fun. If I pull up the list of most beautiful African women, I think my top 5 would be Ethiopia, Somalia, Senegal. Senegal has some bad ones too. Ghana, and I'm kind of, I should have said top 6. I love Southern African women also, but Nigeria have to be in there. Just sheer numbers, right? But Ethiopia's population in the year 2100 is 242 million. Woo! In the year 2040, it's 164 million. In the year 2025, it's 125 million.
Oh no, it's going in the opposite direction.
Oh no, but I was counting backwards.
Oh, you count back. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so in year 2025, 7 years from now, it's going to be 125 million. I think they just broke 100 million like last year or something like that.
Nice.
In 2015, it was 99 million. 2020, it's 111 million. Yeah.
Do you think that, I don't know, I was kind of thinking to myself, like, man, maybe it is crucial or important for, as we continue to go over these numbers and how how the different countries in Africa's population will increase, I'm thinking to myself, like, maybe it is important for the African Union to encourage for the countries to become kind of one or unified to a certain extent. I mean, you want to protect and maintain the different cultures within the different African countries. I'm not like promoting a culturalization, but I think that in order for them to prosper or grow in certain areas, such as manufacturing, such as school, medicine, things of that nature, unification may actually be really helpful and would assist a lot in the countries.
I agree with you. I think that might be the only way to go. I would say, like, ideally, the perfect thing to do would be redraw your state lines altogether, being that those state lines weren't drawn by you in the first place. Like, you have half of one tribe on one side of the border and the other half on the other side of the border. Maybe if people were really planning for the people that lived in that continent before, they would have had all of that tribe with their own country, like if you're in Vietnam, everybody in Vietnam, well, let me not speak about what I don't know, but I would assume everybody in Vietnam is pretty much homogenous. And the people in Laos are, the people in Laos. They're separate, but they're also homogenous genetically or culturally, whatever else. And that's not the case in Africa. So I think, and there are certain African countries that are doing this, or has been in talks, like they're talking about creating something called the East African Union, and it's like Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Rwanda, and Burundi. I think it's like 6 different countries that are talking about, hey, we're all going to be one country. But I'm also thinking the logic is people don't like to give up power. So if you have a president that says, look, you don't have absolute power anymore, you're just going to have power over your state, but now we're going to have a chair, or we're going to elect one president for this entire region. Some people wouldn't want to go for that because they're just going to look at it as they're being taken advantage of. They're going to look at it as some tribal stuff, some national stuff, where even though we know that gives them a larger trading area, access to the coastal areas that they can use to their advantages. I think the president in Ethiopia, he had that long-standing war with the president of Eritrea. What was an armistice or something? But there had been a war since like the 1990s. Abiy Ahmed, I think his name is, and he actually he quashed all that. He crushed everything. He's a new guy. He's young. He's probably like 40 years old. But, he also realized we need those ports. We all one people. We're culturally, they are. Eritrean, Ethiopians, no real difference there, right? They're all homogenous looking, speak the same type of languages. They can all, but they were just at war. So he's saying, okay, look, I got 100 million plus people here who need those ports. And there's other reasons also. But let's quash whatever we have going on. So he crushed it. Right? He just said, look, we're putting an end to this. And he made so many people in that region really, really happy. The people there love him. So yeah, it needs to happen. I mean, you do have like economic unions, like you have ECOWAS, and I think it's ECOWAS in West Africa. You have a different one, the unification of East African states, but I think those are more based just on making sure they all have PPP, purchasing power parity. They have trading to set up in between, though. Less so the whole of government. We're going to all be one country type of idea.
I think that's even awesome, like economic unification.
Yeah.
So that they can trade with one another and benefit from each other from an economic standpoint. And that, yeah, I think that's good. Even if it's not like just one government that covers all the African countries and is, kind of pervasive in all the different aspects of life. But yeah.
Yeah. A few more things here. Let's see. Talked about robots are the future.
Robots are the future. I agree with that.
We're talking about technology, how technology is going to impact this. I mean, in a lot of ways, technology will impact that population in great ways, because when you're talking about, I don't know, water desalination, you're talking about solar power, you're going to need those type of technologies to help people. But do you really need a robot in McDonald's that can flip all the burgers, taking the jobs from all your kids, if you already know you have a whole bunch of kids to get jobs for?
Yeah, I think that's a grave mistake. I don't know if there's any way to control the direction that we're going in as far as, technology. I know that Africa is maybe, obviously they're more behind in regards to technology compared to America and some of the different European countries.
And Asian countries, definitely.
Definitely. Definitely the Asian countries. So maybe they could prevent technology from becoming so invasive in their economy, and that would allow for kind of these lower level jobs to be available for their children and, for other, particular people, poor people and things of that nature. But so maybe in Africa, there's a chance to prevent that technological takeover to a certain extent. I think there's a lot of benefits from an economic standpoint when you look at the interplay between technology and companies and corporations. It allows for you to produce at a faster rate and more effectively and efficiently, and that obviously will result in a greater output and a greater pecuniary benefit. So at a certain level, yeah, technology in Africa would be really good and helpful, but yeah, I would like for a little bit of protection of maybe some of those service jobs, like you were saying, McDonald's, a cashier or something like that. Let's leave that for the kids or something,
Socially is better too, right? Because I mean, I don't know if I want to go to McDonald's and have a damn robot flip a burger out to me. Insert your money here. People will be so sorry. We already stuck on our phones. We don't talk to each other, don't know how to deal with each other. So we need, I think, and then two, when you're talking about customer service in Africa and how that, I've not heard the greatest things about customer service in Africa. They're saying that's someplace that another area that Africa really needs to catch up. But I'd rather go to a McDonald's and have a person smile at me.
Yeah.
And take my order, then go deal with some type of cold machine. Almost like, as much as I like to order things off Amazon, there's still something very, people just like to go out to stores and hunt for a good bargain, See what they're going to buy.
You're right. We're losing that human element.
Yeah, the human element, exactly. We got to make sure we don't lose the human element. So that the robot is the future. I don't know if there's any stopping that. However, I think we need to be really smart about maybe ensuring that a company that's going to do business, I think they're going to have quotas that they have to hire this many type of people. They're going to have have quotas that say you have to hire people. You have to hire this many people. Period. You can't just hire robots. Talked about standard of beauty, talked about robots are the future. Okay. instigations and wars. Let's just talk about war. Like we got that many people on one continent, and it's a very big continent. Believe me, the density is still low. However, people start warring over water, or people just start warring over women. You know, a lot of wars get started over women. It'll get to the point, you know, Ghana might say, man, or Senegal might say, man, Nigeria's coming over here. All these Anglophone speaking mugs are coming over here and stealing all of our good Francophone women. You know, I mean, we really don't know, right? I mean, it can be anything. It can be resources. It can be water. It can be fear, xenophobia. It can be over ladies. It can be over diamonds. But I don't know if there is a way to avert a war when you're talking about 4.3 billion people, especially if they're not all well-fed, happy with their lives. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, especially considering where Africa is at in regards to their in regards to their militaries. Like, they're not as technologically advanced. That fear of extreme devastation at a massive scale may not be as great. Like, when I think about some of the great countries across, not great countries, but the countries across the world that have advanced militaries, there is this genuine fear that if we don't maintain some degree or some level of peace between these countries, that could result in the end of the world as we know it, or at least the end of our race as we know it, but the human race as we know it. But in Africa, you don't have that type of military advancement. So given that, I think that that's just one factor that could potentially increase the chances of conflagration between the different countries as they grow in population, and they struggle over those different resources and factors that you spoke of.
So hopefully, I don't know. As much as I say I want to move to Africa, and I'm pretty sure I'll be there, I'm not throwing my passport away because stuff gets hairy over there. I'm on the first plane back to the good old U.S. of A. Hopefully things won't be too crazy here.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to be where there's war, and hopefully we don't have, with a population of 11 billion, hopefully we're not hit with a world war anytime soon.
Yeah.
Instigating wars. Build Africa. Build Africa. Okay. And this is the final point I'll make. And that's just that if we don't build Africa to the liking and specification of African people, I know people hear the term Africa for the Africans, and that might upset some people. But the point that I'm trying to make is, if it's not built to the specification of Africans, with Africans in mind, being that it's Africans that live on the continent, Africans who have lived on the continents for hundreds of years, if they're not satisfied in Africa, then they become migrants. And those migrants have to go to places like Europe and the United States, right? You have migrants, some will come, and doctors or whatever else, and you have refugees, and they're just running from a bad situation in their country. And that's all good, it's all well. However, if we don't fix, I'm not going to say fix, because Africa is being built currently. But if we don't continue to build Africa at scale to keep up with this population, then people are forced to go to other places, which is going to set tension against other peoples in other places, which could possibly cause war.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Even when I think about India and its population size, I haven't visited yet, but I have some colleagues and friends that have, and they tell me about how overpopulated it is and how there's like so many impecunious people like scattered everywhere. And, that's not appealing to to people, not only people that live there, and it's unfortunate that they live in those circumstances, but even people visiting. They're not going to want to it. Now, obviously, there's certain areas and sites like the Taj Mahal and different things in India that's very appealing and attractive, and people go and visit. But I don't know if I'm making the point there. But so in Africa, yeah, I think it's really important that we build Africa's infrastructure, that we ensure that there's job opportunities and money for Africa's people so that they can maintain certain living standards. And that would help to prevent that flight of Africans from the motherland to other places. So I think that's extremely important. You know, we just live in a world where people want to exist within good living conditions. They want a nice house. They want beautiful cities with beautiful buildings and skyscrapers. They want things to do within their cities or within the area that they live in, or at least to have access to a city that's beautiful like that. And that's what people like. So it is important that the different countries in Africa, as they expand in regards to their population, that they build their infrastructure to support that expansion and to continue to attract people from outside of Africa to come and visit and pour their money into, into Africa during their visitation, So yeah, I agree. I think that's really important. And I think it's important for us as, I know we've talked about this in prior podcasts or maybe even offline, but I'm starting to see more and more of the importance of us kind of pouring into the motherland and being okay with, like, some of us have to be okay with taking that risk. I mean, I love my country. I love America, but I am of African ancestry and I love the motherland as well. That's where my ancestors are from. So I want the Black community and Americans, period, to do better and to thrive. But I also want to see the same for the motherland. So I feel like and maybe this is weird and this is wrong, or it's just my perspective. I feel like I owe that a little bit to the motherland,
Yeah. Yeah, without a good connection to the trunk of the tree.
Yeah.
All right, so that's going to, I don't know if there's any way of that. I think you have even if it's just 1% of African Americans or 0.5% that take that risk, that is going to build strategic lines of communication, those intercontinental lines of communications. Oh, this is one thing. All right, we're gonna do another video. I'm gonna cut this one short, but I did want to bring up this one thing. Have you ever heard of AGOA?
AGOA, I haven't.
The Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. Bill Clinton signed it into law before he left office. George Bush kept it as law. So did Barack Obama. And Trump is also decided to keep it in law.
Nice.
And basically what it is we get free trade with Africa, meaning we don't pay any tariffs for anything. If you're doing business with Africa, look it up. If you're doing business with Africa, you can avoid paying any type of duties or tariffs importing from Africa or exporting to Africa.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's something that you have to pay for the transportation.
Right.
About any tariffs.
Man, I mean that's huge. From a financial standpoint.
And that might have just been one way. It might have just been just from Africa to the U.S. I don't know if we have any say so if African countries, tariff our goods going out there. But regardless, that means if you go to Africa and you get a bunch of these really cool hats that the Fulani people wear in northern Nigeria, right? You get a bunch of these hats and you send them back to the U.S. in a container. You bought them for $5 there. You pay transportation. You sell them for $25 in the U.S. and you're not paying any tariffs. You're not paying an extra 15 or 20% when that container hits the port.
Wow.
AGOA, Africa Growth and Opportunity Act.
Why haven't I heard of this?
I know. I just heard about it maybe like a week ago. I was like, what? I said, what?
Dang.
Yeah, so that okay. At that point, I'm thinking we had a really good video, man. I'm gonna go ahead. I'll stop it here. I think we came to a logical conclusion. Um, and hopefully, if you're listening to this, you got something out of it. We're gonna follow this up with another video in the next day or so. We're gonna be talking about, GDP, GNP, GNI, the differences of those things. We'll be talking about remittances and a few other things to really look at these economies to see which economies are doing well. We'll also talk about bringing some of the black market in these countries to bear to the real economy or whatever else, what that means. And we'll just, give you a good idea of just how wealthy some of these different African nations are. All right, so at this point, Dave, you got any final points, parting points?
Man, this was just a really good and productive conversation. And I'm looking forward to some of these other videos. So thanks, listeners, for listening to us. And yeah, it was great, man.
For sure. All right, signing off.